Chapter 1. Whispers in the Dark. The First Sighting. The static from the cruiser's radio was the only sound cutting through the suffocating silence of the Blackwood Pass. Deputy Mark Riggins' knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his eyes constantly scanning the deep ink-black wall of pine trees pressing in from both sides of the desolate road. His high beams carved two trembling tunnels of light into the darkness, illuminating nothing but asphalt and the skeletal shadows of overhanging branches. Tick, 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 the engine cooling, the only heartbeat in the night. A call had just crackled through from dispatch. A possible prowler. Old Man Miller's place. Again. Probably just raccoons in the trash cans. It always was. But the old man's voice had been tight, frayed with a fear that sounded different this time. Riggins guided the cruiser off the main route, tires crunching on the gravel driveway that led back to the isolated farmhouse. The porch light was a lone, dim yellow eye in the vast, star-choked darkness. He killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was absolute, heavy, listening. He stepped out, the crunch of his boots on the gravel absurdly loud. A sharp, cold wind snaked through the trees, carrying a smell it shouldn't have. Not the clean scent of pine and damp earth. This was metallic, coppery, like old pennies and wet rust. His flashlight beam cut a frantic path across the yard, jumping over the tractor, the woodpile, the scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound froze him mid-step. It came from behind the barn, not the skittering of an animal. This was slower, deliberate. The sound of something sharp being dragged across weathered wood. Sheriff's department. His voice was swallowed by the night, yielding no echo. The scratching stopped. Silence rushed back in, thicker than before. Then, a whisper. So faint he felt it more than heard it, a vibration on the air that raised the hairs on his arms. It wasn't English. It was guttural, a language of cracks and pops, spoken through a throat not meant for words. The beam of his flashlight trembled slightly in his hand as he rounded the corner of the barn. The back wall was gouged. Deep, parallel furrows were carved. Into the heavy timber, splinters sticking out like claws. Something had torn into the wood. Something powerful. Something that was now standing just beyond the edge of his light. He swung the beam up. Two pinpricks of reflected light shone back, at him from the tree line low to the ground. Animal eyes. But they were too far apart, too high off the ground. It took a single hitching step forward. The light caught a limb. It was grotesquely long, ending in claws that curled like sickles against the damp earth. The body was a hulking shadow, all wrong angles and bunched muscle, moving with a slinking, unnatural grace. It let out a sound, a low, rumbling growl that was layered with something that sounded like a distorted, mocking laugh. Riggins's breath hitched in his throat. His service pistol was in his hand, but it felt like a toy. Useless. The thing in the shadows took another step, and the flashlight beam fully illuminated its face for a single, heart-stopping second. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a man. It was a nightmare. And then it was gone, vanished into the oppressive dark of the forest without a sound. The only evidence it had ever been there was the brutal scarring on the barn wall, and the lingering, coppery stench of blood on the wind. Deputy Mark Riggins stood alone in the crushing silence, his heart hammering against his ribs, the whisper still echoing in the dark corners of his mind. The patrol had just begun, and he knew, with a cold, certain dread, that it was hunting him now. Chapter 2. Footsteps on the empty road, Deputy. Mark Riggins didn't remember getting back into his cruiser. One moment he was standing frozen behind Miller's barn. The next, he was behind the wheel, engine roaring to life, tires spitting gravel as he fishtailed back onto the main road. His hands shook so badly he could barely keep the car centered between the lines. Breathe. Just breathe. He kept replaying it, The claws, the eyes, the sound that was half growl, half laughter. His training told him to call it in. Animal sighting. Large predator, possibly injured, but the words stuck in his throat. That thing was no animal, and it wasn't injured. It was aware. He thumbed the radio. Dispatch, this is 7 Adam 12. Go ahead, 7 Adam 12. Sarah's voice was calm, routine. I'm out near the Miller farm, requesting backup for a possible 1099. Suspicious activity. He couldn't bring himself to say more. Copy that. 7 Adam 12. Unit 7. Baker 44 is en route. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes. An eternity. He slowed the cruiser, trying to steady his pulse. The trees loomed like silent witnesses. No stars pierced. The canopy here? Only darkness. That's when he heard it. Thump. A dull impact against the rear of the vehicle. Not a pothole. Something had hit the car. He slammed the brakes. Tires screeching. Grabbed his maglite and sidearm, swung the door open. Sheriff's Department, show yourself! Nothing. The road was empty in both directions. His spotlight swept. The asphalt. Nothing but cracked pavement and fallen pine needles. Then his beam caught something. In the middle of the road, 20 feet behind the cruiser, a single, wet footprint. Too large to be human. 3 long toes ending in deep gouges, where claws had dug into the asphalt. His radio crackled. 7 Adam 12 status? He couldn't speak. His eyes were fixed on the footprint. Crunch. A twig snapped in the woods to his right. He spun, flashlight cutting a jagged path between the trees. Nothing moved. Crunch. Crunch. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Keeping pace just beyond the light. He backed toward the driver's side door, weapon raised. Riggins? You there? Static fizzed through the speaker. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a low, rhythmic tapping began, like a single claw tapping against bark. Tap, tap, tap. It was closer now, just beyond the tree line. He lunged into the cruiser, locked the doors, threw it into drive. As he pulled away, he glanced into the rearview mirror. 2 pinpricks of light reflected back at him from the center of the empty road, watching him leave. He didn't slow down until he saw the flashing blue lights of Deputy Lewis's truck approaching from the opposite direction. He wouldn't tell Lewis what he saw. Not yet. Not all of it. Some things are too terrifying to say out loud. Chapter 3. The creature with burning eyes. Deputy Lewis's cruiser pulled alongside, his window already down. Riggins? You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. Mark Riggins forced his grip to loosen on the steering wheel. His heart was still a frantic drum against his ribs. He could still see those 2 points of light in his rear view. Watching. Always watching. Yeah. He lied, his voice rough. Yeah, just thought I saw something big. A bear, maybe. Spooked me is all. He couldn't meet Lewis's eyes. A bear. The word felt childish, an insult to the intelligence of the thing he'd seen. Lewis, a veteran with a graying mustache and tired eyes, just nodded slowly. He didn't press. All right, I'll do a loop. Keep your radio on. Mark didn't go far. He parked at the old scenic overlook a mile down the road, killing the engine but leaving the light bar on, painting the trees in a silent, swirling blue wash. He needed a minute. He needed to think. He stared out at the vast, dark valley below, but his mind was back on that road, hearing the tap of a claw on bark, a soft thump on the roof of the cruiser. Mark jumped, his hand flying to his sidearm. A pine cone. It's just a damn pine cone. Thump. Another, then another. Thump. 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 A rapid, gentle percussion directly above his head. It wasn't coming from above. It was coming from on top of the car. He sat frozen, staring at the roof, liner. He could hear a slow, heavy scraping sound, like something was shifting its weight up there. The cruiser rocked slightly on its shocks. His breath fogged the windshield. Slowly, against every screaming instinct in his body, he leaned forward, peering up through the glass, and he saw it. Pressed against the windshield upside down was a face. It was elongated, its skin a mottled, hairless gray like a corpse pulled from a river. Its mouth was a lipless gash, too wide, lined with needle-like teeth. But it was the eyes that stopped his heart. They were not the reflective orbs from the barn. They were now pools of smoldering orange ember, like burning coals set deep into its skull. They held no emotion, no animal rage, only a cold, ancient hunger. It stared directly at him, a single clawed hand, long, twisted fingers ending in black, razor-sharp talons, slid down the glass with a sickening squeal, leaving 4 parallel scratches in the laminate. It was studying him, trapping him. With a strangled cry, Mark fumbled for the ignition, key scratching metal. He jammed the car into gear and slammed his foot on the accelerator. The cruiser lurched forward. The creature on the roof scrambled, claws screeching against the metal as it fought for purchase. For one terrifying second, those burning eyes filled the driver's side window, glaring in at him. Then, with a final scrape of talons, it was gone. Mark didn't stop. He didn't look back. He sped down the mountain road, the blue light still flashing, illuminating nothing but the empty road ahead. He knew it was still out there, and it knew him now, not as a deputy, not as a man, as prey. Chapter 4. Shadows beyond the perimeter fence. The secure facility at Hawks Ridge was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of order, of concrete and steel, of bright halogen lights burning away the superstitions of the deep woods. As Deputy Riggins pulled up to the heavy gate, the uniformed guard stepping out of the booth looked more solid and real than anything he'd experienced in the last hour. "Evening, Deputy," the guard said, his voice flat, professional. "Everything all right?" Riggins rolled down the window, the cold air biting his face. He willed his voice to be steady. "Just need to use the comms. Spotty reception on the ridge." It was a flimsy excuse. Every cruiser had a radio. But the guard just nodded, his eyes lingering on Riggins's pale, sweat-sheened face for a second too long before he hit the button. The chain-link gate, topped with razor wire, began to rumble open. Inside the perimeter, Riggins parked near the main communications array, its red beacons cutting through the night. He stayed in the car for a moment, watching the guards in their tower, their silhouettes moving behind reinforced glass. He was safe. Nothing could get past that fence. He finally stepped out, the crunch of his boots on the gravel a familiar, comforting sound. He leaned against the warm hood of his cruiser, pulling out a crumpled pack of cigarettes. His hands were almost steady now. The first drag of smoke burned his lungs, a welcome human pain. That's when the lights flickered, not a power outage. A dip. The halogens dimmed for a fraction of a second, buzzing like angry insects. The guards in the tower looked up, then shrugged. Generator glitch. Then the perimeter lights went out. Not all of them. A single stretch on the western fence line, the one that backed onto the deepest part of the forest, plunged into darkness. The emergency backups kicked in, casting a weak, sickly yellow glow that seemed to make the shadows deeper. Riggins straightened up, his cigarette forgotten, dropping to the ground in a shower of sparks. From the woods, a low branch snapped, then another. Something was moving, something big, pacing just beyond the ring of failed light. A guard's voice crackled over a nearby radio. "Hey, Sarge, motion sensor on the west fence is going crazy. Must be a deer." Riggins took a step forward, then another, drawn toward the darkness. He saw it then. A shadow, deeper and blacker than the night around it, separated itself from the tree line. It stood on 2 legs, impossibly tall and gaunt, its outline warping the scant light around it. It stopped at the very edge of the dark, right where the security lights had failed. It was just standing there, watching the base, watching him. It took a step forward, one long, twisted limb passing through the chain-link fence as if it weren't there. The metal didn't bend or break. It didn't even quiver. The shadow limb emerged on the inside, its clawed foot settling silently on the gravel within the perimeter. It was inside. Riggins's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to shout, to raise the alarm, but his voice was gone. The creature took another step, its whole form now inside the fence, standing in the weak emergency light. It turned its head. Those burning, coal-like eyes found his across the compound. A siren blared to life, a sharp, deafening wail. The main lights flashed back on with a thunderous hum, flooding the area with blinding white light. Riggins blinked, shielding his eyes. The stretch of fence was empty. The shadow was gone. The forest was still. A guard jogged over. Transformer blew on the west side. Freaking raccoons, probably. You okay, deputy? You look like you've seen a ghost. Riggins didn't answer. He was staring at a spot on the inside of the perimeter fence. Right where the thing had stood, there, in the gravel, was a single familiar footprint. 3 toes, claw marks. It hadn't been a ghost. It had been a message. The fences couldn't keep it out. Nowhere was safe. Chapter 5. When radios go silent. The control room of the sheriff's department was a cocoon of artificial light and low, urgent chatter. Deputy Riggins stood before the large county map, a red pin marking the Miller farm. He'd finally told them everything. The claws, the eyes, the thing on his roof, the shadow inside the secure base. Sheriff Hayes, a man built like an oak tree with a face carved from granite, listened with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "It's hunting, Sheriff," Riggins finished, his voice hollow. "It's not an animal. It's intelligent." Hayes let out a long, slow breath. "All right, Mark. I believe you saw something. Lewis saw something too, on his loop. Didn't want to say it over the air." He pointed a thick finger at the map. "We're setting up a perimeter here, here, and here. Every unit we have will sweep the area. We find this bear, or whatever it is." The plan was simple. 4 cruisers would form a moving cordon, driving slowly down parallel fire breaks and logging roads, funneling anything in the woods toward a natural choke point at Dry Creek Bridge. Constant radio contact was mandatory. Riggins was paired with Lewis in car 44. The older deputy was quiet, his usual easy demeanor replaced by a tense vigilance. "Just keep your eyes open, kid," he said, his voice low, "and your sidearm closer." The 4 cars split into the woods, their headlights cutting swaths through the oppressive dark. The forest seemed to swallow the sound of their engines. Unit 12, entering position Alpha, no contact. Unit 33 at Bravo, all quiet. Unit 19 at Charlie. "Nothing but trees. Car 44 at Delta, we're in position." Lewis keyed the mic. "Beginning sweep now, everyone stay sharp." The slow advance began. The radio chatter was steady, professional. Every 30 seconds, a check-in. Unit 12, clear. Unit 33, clear. Unit 19, all good. 44, we're good. Riggins stared into the wall of trees, his flashlight beam dancing over trunks and ferns. Every shadow seemed to move. Every branch looked like a claw. Unit 12, still clear? Wait. What was that? The voice from Unit 12 was sharp. "Alert! Go ahead, 12, dispatch responded. "Movement! Just past my lights! Something big! Breaking off to investigate!" Silence for a beat. Then a burst of static. A voice, distorted, panicked. "Eyes! God, its eyes are—" The transmission dissolved into a scream, a raw electronic shriek of pure terror, then cut off into a deafening blankness. "Unit 12? Unit 12, respond!" Dispatch's voice was urgent now. "Nothing. Unit. 19, I'm closest. Moving to assist." Another deputy's voice, cut short by a loud thump and the screech of tearing metal. The transmission didn't end. It remained open, broadcasting a horrifying soundtrack, the sound of glass breaking, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through the speaker, and a single, wet, final gasp. Then, dead air. Units 33 and 44, abort! Fall back to the bridge! Now! Sheriff Hayes's voice boomed over the radio, stripped of all composure. Lewis slammed the cruiser into reverse, spinning the wheel. Gravel flew. Hold on! Riggins grabbed the dashboard, his heart in his throat. He keyed his own mic. Dispatch, this is 44. We are en route to Rally Point. Do you copy? Only static answered. Dispatch? Sheriff? Anyone? Lewis tried, his knuckles white. The radio wasn't just silent. It was dead. Not the hiss of empty air, but a flat, vacuum-like absence of sound, as if all the signals in the world had been sucked into a void. They skidded to a halt at the rendezvous point at Dry Creek Bridge. They were alone. No other cruisers, no flashing lights, just the dark, the quiet, and the shallow creek gurgling below. Lewis picked up the radio handset, his hand shaking. This is Unit 44. Is anyone out there? Please respond, a voice crackled back. It was faint, broken, but unmistakably the sheriff's. Get out! The woods! It's in the... The signal died. Then a new sound came through the speaker. Not a voice, not static. It was the sound of heavy rhythmic breathing, and beneath it, that same low rhythmic tap. Tap, tap of a single claw. It was coming from their own radio. It was right on top of them. Chapter 6. The Patrol That Never Returned. The silence in the cruiser was a physical weight. The only sound was the frantic thumping of two hearts and the shallow, ragged pull of their own breath. The radio was dead, not silent, dead. The small red power light had blinked out completely. The thing was not just mimicking them or interrupting the signal. It had killed the device itself. Lewis's face was ashen in the green glow of the dashboard lights. It's hurting us, he whispered, his voice cracking. It took the others. It's driving us somewhere. Riggins didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the rearview mirror. The road behind them was a tunnel of darkness, empty. Then the headlights of the cruiser flickered. Once, twice. They dimmed to a dull orange-brown, then surged back to full brightness, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to reach for them. No, 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 Lewis muttered, slamming his palm on the dashboard. Not now, come on! The engine coughed. A sick, wet sound from under the hood. The RPM needle dipped violently. It's not the car, Lewis, Riggins said, his voice eerily calm. He was beyond panic now, sinking into a cold, numb dread. It's him. The engine died. The click of the ignition failing was the loudest sound Riggins had ever heard. The headlights faded out, plunging them into absolute blackness. The dashboard lights sputtered and went dark. The only light came from the sliver of a moon high above, doing little more than painting the world in shades of gray. They were trapped in a metal coffin, deep in the creature's territory. We have to run for it, Lewis said, fumbling for his door handle. On 3. We run for the creek, follow it downstream. 1, 2... On 3, Lewis shoved his door open and burst out into the night, his flashlight beam a frantic, jittering lance in the dark. Riggins followed, his own light in one hand, his service weapon in the other. They hadn't taken 5 steps when Lewis's light died. Not the bulb burning out. It was as if something swallowed the light whole. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. Riggins! Lewis's voice was a strangled cry. Riggins swung his beam toward the sound. Lewis was standing frozen 10 feet away, staring into the trees. His flashlight lay at his feet, dark and dead. Standing between him and Riggins was the creature. It was fully revealed in the beam of Riggins's light, no longer a shadow or a suggestion. It stood on its hind legs, easily 8 feet tall, its mottled, hairless skin seeming to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Its long arms ended in those vicious, curved talons that dripped with a dark, viscous fluid. And its eyes, those burning coals, were fixed on Deputy Lewis. It moved with a speed that was impossible, a blur of gray flesh and malice. Lewis managed to get a single shot off. The gunshot was obscenely loud, a brief, defiant crack against the suffocating silence. The creature didn't flinch. The bullet seemed to have no effect. One of its clawed hands lashed out. There was a wet, tearing sound. Lewis's scream was cut short. Riggins stood paralyzed, his flashlight beam shaking violently over the scene. The creature turned its head slowly from Lewis's still form on the ground, those burning eyes locked. On to Riggins. It took a step toward him, then another. It was not running. It was stalking. It knew he had nowhere to go. A primal survival instinct overrode his terror. Riggins turned and ran. He didn't look back. He crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping at his face, thorns tearing at his uniform. He could hear it behind him. Not the sound of pursuit, but the steady, relentless crunch. Crunch. Crunch of its footsteps, keeping perfect pace, never falling behind, never gaining. It was toying with him. He ran until his lungs burned, and his legs gave out, collapsing behind a fallen log. He curled into a ball, trying to make himself small, trying to silence his ragged gasps for air. The footsteps stopped. The forest was silent again. He dared to peer over the log. It was standing, on the other side. It wasn't even breathing heavily. It just stared down at him, its head cocked to one side in a gesture of grotesque curiosity. The smell of ozone and wet earth and copper blood washed over him. It leaned down, its burning eyes inches from his face. It didn't attack. It simply raised one clawed finger to where its lips would be, if it had any. Shh. Then, it melted back into the shadows, vanishing as if it had never been there. Deputy Mark Riggins was alone. He was unarmed. He was lost. And he knew with a certainty that chilled his soul that the others were gone. The patrol had never returned. He was the only one left, and the hunt was far from over. Chapter 7. Unnatural Screams in the Night Alone. The word echoed in the crushing silence left in the creature's wake. Deputy Riggins scrambled backward from the log, his uniform snagging on roots, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps that sounded like screams in the quiet. He was alone. Lewis was gone. The others were gone. The silence was a predator itself, waiting to pounce. He had to move. Staying still was death. He pushed himself to his feet, every muscle screaming in protest, and began to stumble through the woods, directionless. His only goal was to put distance between himself and the spot where Lewis had fallen. The moon offered little mercy, casting deceptive shadows that twisted into clawed hands and hunched forms. Then, a sound sliced through the night. It was a scream, but not human. It was a high, piercing shriek, metallic and distorted, like feedback from a broken amplifier. It didn't come from one direction. It seemed to emanate from the trees themselves, vibrating in the air around him. It was a sound of pure, unnatural agony. Riggins dropped to his knees, hands clamped over his ears. It was inside his head, scraping, against his sanity. As suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. Then a new sound began, a voice. It was Deputy Lewis's voice, but wrong. It was stretched thin, digitized, like a corrupted audio file. Played backward, Riggins.
"Help me. It's so dark in here."
The voice came from behind a thick oak tree to his left. Riggins stared, his blood running cold.
"My chest. It hurts. Why did you run, partner?"
It was a perfect mimic. the cadence, the slight drawl. Lewis had. It was him, and it was coming from the darkness behind that tree. A rational part of Riggins's mind knew it was a trick, a lure. But the sound clawed at his guilt, at his grief. He took a half-step forward. "Come find me, Mark," the voice pleaded, then dissolved into a wet, gurgling cough. Another scream ripped through the forest, this time from his right. It was the voice of the young deputy from Unit 12, the one who had been cut off first. "It's eyes! Make it stop! Make it stop!" The forest was no longer silent. It was a cacophony of tormented ghosts, voices of dead men and women he knew, calls for help, sobs of terror, all twisted and warped by the thing that had killed them. They called his name from every shadow, each voice a hook in his soul, trying to pull him apart, to pull him deeper, into the woods. He started to run again, not away from the sounds, but through them. They were everywhere, a chorus of the damned conducted by the monster hunting him. "Don't leave us out here, deputy. It's coming, it's right behind you. Join us, Riggins." He tripped over an exposed root and landed hard. The wind knocked out of him. He rolled onto his back, staring up at the sliver of moon. The voices ceased. The forest was, once again, deathly quiet. Panting, he pushed himself up on his elbows, and he saw it. It was perched on a branch high in a pine tree 50 yards away, silhouetted against the night sky. It was perfectly still, and from its horrifying, lipless mouth, the perfect, clear voice of Sheriff Hayes boomed out, filled with static and authority it didn't possess. "Riggins! Son, are you there? We've got a fix on your location. Hold tight. Backup is en route. Just stay where you are." The command was so real, so desperately wanted, that a sob of relief caught in Riggins's throat. He almost answered. He almost called out. But he saw it then. The creature's head was tilted, watching him, waiting. The sheriff's voice was just another tool, another way to make him reveal himself, to make him stand up and wave his arms and scream, "I'm here!" right into its trap. It was learning. It was adapting. It knew his fears, his hopes, his weaknesses. The sheriff's voice cut off mid-sentence. The creature dropped from the branch, landing without a sound on the soft forest floor. It didn't look at him again. It simply turned and began to walk slowly, deliberately, deeper into the heart of the woods. It was done playing with its food. The hunt was entering its final phase, and it was leading him to the place where it all would end. Chapter 8. Evidence that disappears by dawn. The creature was gone, but its presence remained, a stain on the air. Riggins forced himself to move, his body operating on autopilot, driven by a single desperate thought. Evidence. I need proof. He had to get back to the cruiser. The dash cam. It had to have seen something. It was the only thing that could validate his sanity, the only weapon he had left. Navigating by a terrified instinct, he stumbled through the undergrowth, expecting a clawed hand to seize him from every shadow. The forest seemed to reject his passage, branches clutching at him like bony fingers. After an eternity of blind, panicked movement, he saw it, the faint, dark shape of the cruiser, silent and dead in the middle of the gravel road. He approached like a ghost, every sense screaming. The driver's side door was still hanging open from their frantic escape. The interior was dark. He half expected to find Lewis's body in the passenger seat. He slid into the driver's seat, his hands trembling as he turned the key. The engine didn't even click. Totally dead. But the dash cam had a battery backup. It should have kept recording. He pressed the power button on the digital recorder mounted below the dashboard. The small screen flickered to life. Hope, sharp and painful, flared in his chest. He navigated to the video archive, scrolling back through the night's footage. There they were, time-stamped files, his conversation with Lewis, the start of the sweep. He fast-forwarded, his heart hammering. He found the moment. The flickering lights, the engine dying. The two of them bursting from the car. The camera, mounted on the windshield, had kept recording. It had seen everything. He watched the screen, his breath held. The footage showed Lewis's flashlight beam, dancing away from the car. Then his light died. The camera's night vision mode kicked in, painting the world in a grainy, spectral green. He saw himself swing his beam toward Lewis. He saw the empty space between them. And then, nothing. The creature was not there. On the video, Lewis simply stopped, raised his service weapon, and fired a single shot into the empty woods. The muzzle flash bloomed white on the screen. Then, in the stark green light of the night vision, Lewis's body jerked, violently, as if struck by an invisible force. He crumpled to the ground without a sound. Riggins stared, his blood turning to ice. There was no monster, no claws, no burning eyes, just a deputy suddenly and inexplicably killing himself. The footage continued. He saw himself on the screen, his face a mask of terror, aiming his weapon at nothing, then turning to flee into the woods. He looked like a madman. A strangled sound escaped his lips. No, it was there. It was real. He scrambled for the radio microphone, a last futile hope. "Dispatch! Any unit! Come in! This is Deputy Riggins! Officer down! Requesting immediate—" The radio was still a dead brick in his hand. He threw it down in a rage and stumbled back out of the car. The dash cam was lying. It had to be. The real evidence was out there. Lewis's body. The wounds would prove it. He followed his own panicked footsteps back into the forest, his flashlight beam weak and trembling. He found the fallen log where he'd hidden. He found the spot where it had all happened. The ground was torn up. But there was no body, no blood, no sign of a struggle. It was as if Deputy Frank Lewis had never existed. He fell to his knees, digging, his fingers into the cold soil. Nothing. The forest had erased him. The first faint glow of dawn began to tinge the eastern sky, turning the blackness to a deep, cold blue. The night was ending, and with it, all evidence of the horror was fading. He understood now. This was its nature. It hunted in the dark, and by the light of day, it was just a story, a rumor, the ravings of a lone, traumatized deputy who had, according to the video, evidence, witnessed his partner's suicide before fleeing into the woods. The proof was gone. He was alone in the cold light of morning, covered in dirt and scratches, with a story no one would ever believe. He was not just its prey. He was its alibi. Chapter 9, The Hunter. Watching the watchman, the first true rays of dawn were cold and gray, offering no comfort. They revealed a world scrubbed clean. The twisted roots, the claw-marked trees, the blood-soaked earth, all of it was gone, replaced by the innocent damp floor of a normal forest. The only thing real was the crushing silence and the empty space, where Frank Lewis should have been. Riggins stumbled back onto the gravel road, a ghost in his own life. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with dirt and dried tears that felt like cracks in porcelain. In the growing light, the cruiser looked like a dead animal on the side of the road. He heard the distant whine of an engine growing closer. Not one, several. He didn't feel relief. He felt a cold, sinking dread. 2 county sheriff's SUVs and an unmarked sedan skidded to a halt, surrounding his dead cruiser. Doors flew open. Sheriff Hayes was there, his face a storm cloud of concern and confusion. Detectives followed, their eyes sharp, analytical, already scanning the scene, already writing the story in their heads. "Riggins! My God, son, what happened?" Hayes boomed, striding forward. "We lost all contact. We found Unit 12 wrecked empty. Unit 19 the same. Lewis, where's Frank?" Riggins opened his mouth. The words were there, the creature, the claws, the mimicry, the eyes that burned, but they died in his throat. He saw the way the detectives looked past him, into the empty woods. He saw the doubt already hardening in their gazes. He saw his own reflection in the SUV's window. A wild-eyed, disheveled man who looked utterly insane. It took them, he whispered, the sound scraping out raw. Who took them, Mark? Hayes asked, his voice low, patient. The voice you use with a child or a mental patient. Riggins just shook his head. He pointed a trembling finger toward the trees. Out there. It's still out there. A search party was organized quickly. Deputies and volunteers fanned out, calling for Lewis, for the others. Their voices were loud, normal, human. They sounded absurdly out of place. Riggins was made to sit in the back of a warm SUV, a foil blanket around his shoulders. He watched them work. He saw a K9 unit arrive. The German shepherd, a confident, powerful animal named Rex, caught a scent, immediately near the tree line. It barked, pulling its handler into the woods. For a moment, hope flickered. The dog would find something. The dog would lead them to it. The handler's radio crackled. His voice was confused, frustrated. The dog's gone silent, just stopped, whining, won't move. Riggins closed his eyes. He knew. He looked up, his eyes drawn to the ridgeline above the road. The tree cover was thick, a dark wall against the brightening sky. And there, just for a second, he saw it. It was standing perfectly still in the deep shadows of a pine tree, half hidden behind the thick trunk. It made no move to hide. It was simply watching. Its head was tilted, those burning coals fixed on the scene below. On the flashing lights, the bustling deputies, the K9 handler trying to coax his terrified dog. It watched the searchers walk within yards of where it had torn Lewis apart, their eyes seeing nothing. A cold smile seemed to touch its lipless mouth. Not a human smile, a grimace of supreme ancient knowing. It wasn't just a predator of flesh. It was a predator of perception. It didn't just hide in the shadows, it manipulated them. It let itself be seen only by its chosen prey, ensuring its own legend would be dismissed as madness. The search parties, the lights, the dogs, it wasn't afraid of them. It was amused by them. It was the hunter and the watchman with all their radios and guns and badges were just more mice scurrying in its field. Its eyes shifted from the scene and locked directly onto Riggins's. It knew he was watching. It knew he understood. It raised one long, taloned finger. Not in a threat, but in a slow, deliberate gesture. A single claw pointed directly at him. You, the gesture said. You are the only one who sees, and that is your curse. Then it melted back into the shadows, becoming one with the tree, then nothing at all. Sheriff Hayes opened the SUV door, letting in a blast of cold air. Mark, we're going to take you to the hospital, get you checked out. We'll figure this out. Riggins didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the ridge, on the empty space where the truth had just been. They thought they were the watchmen, searching for a monster. They didn't understand. The monster was watching them, and it had already won. Chapter 10. Truth buried in the midnight fog. The county hospital was a cage of sterile light and hushed voices. They called it observation. Deputy Mark Riggins knew it was a holding cell for his sanity. They'd taken his clothes, his badge, his gun. They'd given him paper scrubs and a room with a soft, locked door. Sheriff Hayes sat by his bed, his hat in his hands, looking older than Riggins had ever seen him. The dash cam footage, Mark, he began, his voice heavy. There's nothing on it. Lewis, it looks like he couldn't finish. The search teams found nothing. No signs of a struggle. No animal tracks. Nothing. A doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a clipboard, spoke gently. Deputy, you've been through an incredible trauma. It's not uncommon for the mind to create explanations, to protect itself. It's in your head. That's what they were all saying without saying it. PTSD. A breakdown. A tragic series of events his shattered mind had woven into a monster. Riggins stopped talking. He just looked out the window at the setting sun. The night was coming again. They could lock the door, but they couldn't lock out the dark. He was released a week later, officially on medical leave. Unofficially, he was the reason for. Deputies were dead, and his career was a ghost. The official report would call it a tragic accident, a series of events under investigation. The truth was too messy, too impossible. He went back to his small, quiet house on the edge of town. The silence there was different. It was waiting. He tried to live. He mowed the lawn, he bought groceries. He ignored the whispers from his neighbors, the pitying looks, the way parents pulled their children a little closer when he passed. But every night, as midnight approached, a deep, primal dread filled him. He would stand at his back window, staring, into the woods that began at his property line. He knew it was out there. He could feel its gaze like a physical pressure. It was a week after his release. A thick, rolling fog had settled over Blackwood, muffling the world, burying it in a cold, gray silence. Midnight. Riggins stood at the window, a cold cup of coffee forgotten in his hand. The motion-activated floodlight at the edge of his yard flicked on. It was there, standing at the very edge of the circle of light, where the fog swallowed the world. It wasn't hiding. It wasn't hunting. It was just standing. A monument of nightmare made flesh, its burning eyes fixed on his window. It had come to see him, to show him that the bars of his cage were an illusion. It took a single step forward, into the light. The fog swirled around its legs like a shroud. It raised one clawed hand and pointed, not at him, but at the ground at its feet. Then it turned and walked slowly, deliberately, into the fog, disappearing from sight. Riggins's heart was a trip hammer. He knew it was a command, an invitation. He pulled on his boots and a jacket, his hands shaking. He had to go. He had to know. He stepped out into the biting cold. The fog clung to him, wet and cold. He walked toward the spot where it had stood, the floodlight casting his own long, distorted shadow ahead of him. There, in the damp grass, was a single, familiar item. Deputy Frank Lewis's badge. It was caked in dry, blackened mud. The pin bent, the metal scratched, as if by tremendous force. It was proof, tangible, real proof. But as he reached for it, the fog seemed to thicken, coiling around the badge. He watched, helpless, as the metal seemed to decay, to rust at an impossible rate, flaking away into nothingness until only a stain of reddish-brown remained on the grass. Then the fog swallowed that, too. The truth wasn't allowed to be found. It was only allowed to be known. He understood then. This was his life now. He was the sole keeper of a terrible, unbelievable truth. A truth that would die with him, buried in scorn and pity. There would be no glory, no vindication, only the certain knowledge of what lived in the dark. He looked up from the empty ground into the deep, impenetrable fog. From within it, he heard the faintest sound, a low, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. Before it, too, was swallowed by the silence. He was not a deputy anymore. He was a witness. And the night would always be watching back. The end.